Hello and welcome to Southwest. I'm Anusha Ravisood and you are watching State of Play, our daily roundup of all things politics, policy, and human interest. Chief Minister of Karnataka Siddaramaiah may have led his party, the Congress, to a grand victory, 135 seats in an election that saw the highest ever voter turnout, indicating a huge wave in favor of the Congress in 2023. This was for the first time since the 1989 election that any party won with such a huge landslide. Yet, 2 years down the line, 2 years in government, Karnataka Chief Minister Siddaramaiah seems to be in an extremely difficult position, not just in governance but also within the party circles. Over the last 1 week, at least two different MLAs of the incumbent Congress have come out making allegations against their own government. And in turn, an allegation, a criticism against the government will be seen as criticism against the Chief Minister who's heading the government. All is not well in Karnataka Congress or the Karnataka government, and the reasons are much more than what meets the eye. Congress MLAs who ensured that they won their respective seats, riding high on the successful guarantees promise of the Congress, who had no qualms in ensuring that the promise of these guarantees, social welfare schemes aimed at very specific groups of people, are now lamenting about how the guarantees have become a priority of this government. The government that pretty much came to power riding on the popularity, on the promise of these guarantees. The same MLAs who may have these guarantees to owe their victory to are now criticizing the Siddaramaiah government for not providing funds for anything, since the guarantees are taking up such a huge chunk of the state's resources or the state's budget allocation. In the last 1 week, like I said, at least two Congress MLAs have criticized their government. The prominent voice among them was B.R. Patil. B.R. Patil is not a nobody. He's a very senior leader of the Congress and MLA who had resigned, who was appointed as the chief minister's political advisor right after the Congress government came to power, but resigned, citing his opposition to several policy decisions of the government, but more importantly, because the Siddaramaiah government, according to him, was refusing to release funds for constituency development work. New projects were being delayed, new projects were not being sanctioned, or projects that were already in the pipeline were being delayed. Hence, B.R. Patil resigned in protest as the advisor to the chief minister. Now, the same MLA has come out making allegations of bribery, of corruption in the housing ministry in Karnataka. The Minister for Housing in Karnataka is Zamir Ahmed Khan, somebody considered extremely close to Chief Minister Siddaramaiah. B.R. Patil's allegations came right after a video, rather an audio clipping of his conversation with Zamir Ahmed Khan's personal assistant, where he makes allegations of bribery while Zamir Ahmed Khan's staff refute such allegations, insisting that proof be provided so action can be taken against anybody who is indulging in giving or taking of bribery. B.R. Patil stood steadfast on his allegation, insisting that if the chief minister asks him, calls him, and inquires, he is willing to give more information. Even before the dust could settle on this phone conversation, which was very promptly picked up by the opposition, naturally by the BJP and the JDS in Karnataka, to criticize the Siddaramaiah government, another MLA, Raju Kagwar, made a public statement about how he would resign in protest over the government delaying projects in especially districts that are deemed backward in Karnataka. Now, this is not a new allegation. Ever since the Siddaramaiah government has come to power, several MLAs of the Congress and the opposition party, in fact, have raised concerns over how money has been tight, funds have been restricted in constituency development work. While big projects are announced for a city like Bengaluru, while a huge chunk of the budget allocation is made for the delivery of the guarantee schemes, on the back of which the Congress really came to power, funds to districts for developmental works were being restricted and projects were being delayed continuously. Now, this has become a huge opportunity for the opposition in Karnataka to go after the Siddaramaiah government. But why really are all of these things being discussed so openly in public? Well, several leaders of the Congress as well as political observers in Karnataka believe you can chalk it all down to two primary reasons. One, during elections, a lot of candidates depend for finances on their friends, on their kin. Several of them give money, fund their elections in the hope that once this MLA is elected or once this party comes to power, they can be given tenders, government contracts, etc. Definitely an illegal thing to do, but this is supposedly the understanding. With funds being withheld and new projects not being rolled out, tenders and contracts to the MLAs or the elected representatives' choice of contractors is definitely not taking place on ground, which has led to a lot of grouse to be built up within leaders of the Congress party. Second, and more importantly, the lack of accommodation in the cabinet. When you are not a minister, let's remember that the Congress this time has a problem of plenty of MLAs, plenty of these MLAs, 135 plus MLAs who won their election, and out of them, several of them very senior leaders belonging to different communities, all of these communities wanting representation in the cabinet. The argument being that several prominent leaders from the same communities have been accommodated in the past, and hence it is the time for other leaders, for other MLAs from the community to be accommodated. Nonetheless, Chief Minister Siddaramaiah very clearly not leaving any vacancy in the cabinet in Karnataka to put an end to this murmurs, to this fight, to dissent over cabinet. But that strategy does not seem to have really helped, because now the grouse is out in the open. Several leaders, including the likes of B.R. Patil, who were hoping to be cabinet ministers, are now only MLAs, and as MLAs, they believe that they do not have the kind of power and influence they were hoping to have when the party came to power. Now, when one is not an MLA, where else does an elected representative feel powerful? Primarily in two components. One, like I said, in the handing over of contracts, they would like to have a say on who gets government tenders and contracts that are smaller in parcel, because there is a law that is in place for contracts above a certain amount. But anything below that, where contracts are given as small little parcels, the MLAs, elected representatives, definitely want to have a say in who they go to. And the second most important component for those who are not ministers, are MLAs, but want to wield influence, are transfers. Bureaucracy is where elected representatives like to exercise a lot of control, and several of these MLAs have their own grouse about not being able to have a say in transfers of officials, even in their own constituencies, even in the region where they want to maintain their political influence and heft. Not being able to have a say in these components, considering that the Siddaramaiah government is working in an extremely constrained manner as far as funds and control is concerned, the MLAs of the Congress are an extremely disappointed bunch. It's not just the MLAs. In fact, any conversation with cadres of the Congress will have you believe that there is a lot of dissentment, there is a lot of resentment rather, against the incumbent government, although it is their own party, because the party workers believe that they have not been rewarded for the work they have put in to ensure that the party comes to power. To address this concern, the Siddaramaiah government, along with Deputy Chief Minister D.K. Shivkumar, came up, who's also, D.K. Shivkumar is also the president of the party. They came up with a plan to come up with these guarantee implementation committees, which will allow for party workers to be appointed into positions that is associated with the government. The government pays for these guarantee implementation committees, but this decision also has come under a lot of fire, because incidentally, the government is simply setting aside and allocating more money for party workers to be accommodated in positions to carry out work that is already under the purview of the bureaucracy. At the panchayat level, the panchayats are the designated officers or designated office to ensure implementation of these guarantee schemes. So more people being appointed to positions costing the exchequer money just to keep party workers happy is not something that the opposition is willing to let go without criticizing the government for. And all of this public statements against Chief Minister Siddaramaiah comes at a time when his government is already under a lot of scrutiny. He himself is under a lot of scrutiny, unlike his previous term as chief minister between 2013 and 2018, where Siddaramaiah had this clean image, had the image of the socialist leader from the backward classes, a leader meant to appeal to the Ahinda vote bank. This time around, however, a case against his own family members, where he is also named as an accused in the MUDA case, has taken away a chunk of Siddaramaiah's moral high ground. This apart, a lot of criticism is also being thrown against the chief minister for the kind of people that he has surrounded himself with. Very recently, a very senior former IS officer who was given an extension to be the chief minister's, in all fairness, that is the role of a political secretary. However, he was the additional chief secretary to the chief minister. A very prominent known IS officer, LK Atiq, resigned from his post after taking an extension, leading to questions of why an officer who was seen as one of the very few logical, sound advisors to the chief minister was elbowed out of the CMO. Sources from the CMO insist that a tiff of war between some political appointees in the CMO and the chief minister's hand-picked bureaucrats in the same office, a tug of war between the two groups had been underway for a long time. The chief minister ultimately had to give in to political compulsions to continue accommodating political appointees than advisors who come with a huge, vast treasure trove of administrative experience. The mishandling of the entire situation right after the Chinnaswamy Stadium stampede was a prime example of the deteriorating quality of advice, policy decisions, and administrative imbalance, rather, in the chief minister's office in Karnataka. For somebody like Siddaramaiah, who prides in being a good administrator, a series of bad decisions is not looking good. If that is what is happening in the CMO, the Congress in itself is not in a very good position, is not in an enviable position, considering that its own leaders, its MLAs, are making public statements against the party and the government. Will all of this now lead to disciplinary action against MLAs for bringing disrepute or defaming the government in public view, or will the party hold consultations, take feedback, and address concerns instead of taking punitive measures, is something that we have to wait and watch. But in the meantime, there is no doubt that the entire situation has made it impossible for the Congress to take cover from the opposition's relentless attack. More so now that former Chief Minister B.S. Yediyurappa has said he is returning to active politics, although in the BJP's camp and camps that critique BJP's incumbent state president B.Y. Vijayendra have been taking potshot at Vijayendra for having to bring his father back to active politics. For the Congress, this is a scenario where action needs to be taken to put its own house in order before it can start countering the criticism coming in from the opposition. Now, the big question that is doing the rounds in Congress circles is whether all of this is a build-up to a change of leadership come the end of 2025, when Siddaramaiah would have completed 2.5 years in the office of Chief Minister. A change of guard is something definitely not preferable for Siddaramaiah himself, but considering the kind of change of dynamics that you see with the MLAs to the Chief Minister is starkly different from how things were during his previous tenure as CM, when he had much more hold, when he held all the reins of the government. This time around, that situation seems to have changed quite a bit. Will that then also lead to a change of guard is now the big question. Until I come back to you with yet another episode of State of Play, do stay tuned to South First. Thank you so much for watching.